The sound of my son's front door closing behind me felt louder than thunder. I stood there on the porch with my small bag in my hand, my chest tight, my legs shaking. Just minutes earlier, he had looked me in the eyes and said the words that broke me more than losing my house. "Dad, my wife isn't comfortable with you staying here." I wanted to ask him to repeat it. I wanted to believe I heard wrong. This was my son, the boy I carried on my shoulders, the child I fed with my last money when times were hard. Now he was asking me to leave, not because he had no space, not because he was poor, but because his wife did not want me there. I nodded like a fool. I said nothing. I picked up my bag and walked out. And as I stepped onto the street, homeless, ashamed, and broken, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. I almost ignored it. If I had ignored that call, my life would have ended very differently. I answered. "Good morning, sir," a calm male voice said. "My employer has requested to see you immediately. He is very ill. He is a billionaire and he will be signing his will today." I laughed, a weak, empty laugh. I thought it was a cruel joke. "I think you have the wrong person," I said. The man paused. "No, sir, I do not. My employer knows you. He insists. Please prepare to come with me." Before I could ask another question, the call ended. I looked at my phone. My hands were shaking. I had nowhere to go, no home, no family willing to take me in. And now, suddenly, a dying billionaire wanted to see me. Why? And how did he even know my name? As I stood there on the sidewalk, confused and broken, I realized something terrible. This was not a coincidence. And whatever was about to happen next was tied to the life I thought I had buried forever. I need to tell you how I got here. Just 2 weeks earlier, I was still a respected man. My name is Daniel Moore. I am 64 years old. For over 30 years, I ran a construction supply business. It was not flashy, but it was honest. Cement, steel rods, tools, deliveries. I paid my workers on time. I paid my taxes. I slept well at night. I raised my son, Eric, mostly alone after his mother passed away. I taught him to be kind. I taught him to respect people, especially family. Or at least I thought I did. Then everything collapsed. One bad contract led to another. A client I trusted disappeared without paying. Banks stopped answering my calls. Interest piled up. Suppliers turned their backs. Within 6 months, the business I built with my bare hands was gone. I sold my car. I sold equipment. I used my savings to pay staff so they would not suffer. I thought my house was safe. I was wrong. The bank took it fast, cold, legal. One morning I woke up, and by evening the house no longer belonged to me. That night I sat on the floor surrounded by boxes. The walls echoed. 30 years of work reduced to cardboard and silence. I swallowed my pride and called my son. "Eric," I said, trying to sound strong. "Things are bad. I lost the house." There was silence on the line. Then he cleared his throat. "Dad, you can come over for a few days. We'll figure something out." Those words gave me hope. I packed my bag and went to his place the next morning. His house was beautiful, big, clean, warm, the kind of home built with comfort and laughter in mind, or so I thought. His wife, Laura, barely looked at me. She smiled, but her eyes were cold. I tried to be polite. I tried to be invisible. That night I slept on the couch. I did not complain. I was grateful. The next morning, Eric asked me to talk outside. That was when he said it. "Dad, Laura isn't comfortable having you here." He avoided my eyes. He talked about stress, about space, about how it was temporary. Temporary rejection still hurts the same. I did not argue. I did not beg. I nodded and left. Now standing on the street, replaying his words, I felt smaller than I ever had in my life. Then the car arrived. It was black, long, shiny, the kind of car I had only seen on television. A man in a suit stepped out and opened the door. "Mr. Moore," he said politely, "please come with me." I hesitated. "Who is your employer?" The man looked at me carefully. "His name is Henry Blackwood." My heart skipped. Henry Blackwood. The name hit me like a punch. I had not heard that name in over 25 years. Henry Blackwood was not just a billionaire. He was a ghost from my past. I slowly got into the car. As we drove, memories I had buried came rushing back. Memories of a young man I once helped. A man with nothing. A man everyone else ignored. A man who made a choice that changed both our lives forever. The car stopped at a massive gate. Guards opened it without question. Inside was a mansion that looked more like a palace. I was led inside by the butler who had called me. His name was James. He spoke softly, like every word mattered. "My employer does not have much time," he said. "He has been asking for you repeatedly." "Why?" I asked. James looked straight ahead. "He said you are the only man he trusts." That made no sense. We entered a quiet room. Machines beeped softly. On the bed lay an old man, thin, pale, breathing with effort. But I recognized his eyes. Henry Blackwood looked at me and smiled weakly. "Daniel," he whispered, "you came." I took a step closer. My throat burned. "Henry, why am I here?" Tears filled his eyes. "Because," he said slowly, "before I die, I need to fix a terrible wrong." He raised a trembling hand. "And your son must never touch what is meant for you." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" I asked. Henry tried to speak again, but the machine beside him began to beep faster. Nurses rushed in. James gently pushed me back. "Please wait outside," he said urgently. As I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding, one thought repeated in my mind. How did Henry know my son? And what terrible wrong was he talking about? Before the door closed, Henry looked at me one last time and whispered words that changed everything. "They betrayed you long before today." The door shut, and I knew my life was about to collide with secrets far darker than losing a home. I sat alone in the long hallway, staring at the closed door where Henry Blackwood lay fighting for his life. The words he whispered kept repeating in my head like a broken bell. "They betrayed you long before today." My hands were cold. My mouth felt dry. I tried to connect the pieces, but nothing made sense yet. My son betraying me was already painful enough, but Henry saying it happened long ago made my chest tighten with fear. James, the butler, returned a few minutes later. His face was serious but gentle. "Please follow me, sir," he said. "My employer is resting now, but he asked that you be made comfortable." Comfortable. The word felt strange. I had been turned away from my son's house only hours earlier. Now I was being led through halls with marble floors and quiet paintings worth more than my old home. James showed me into a small guest room. It was simple, clean, and calm. He placed a glass of water on the table. "You may stay here," he said. "We will call you when Mr. Blackwood wakes." I nodded. "James," I said, stopping him before he left, "how does Mr. Blackwood know my son?" James paused. For a moment I thought he would refuse to answer. Instead, he said, "Because your son has been coming here for years." My heart dropped. "For years?" I asked. "That's not possible." James looked at me carefully. "I believe it is." He left me alone with my thoughts. I sat on the bed feeling dizzy. My son had been visiting Henry Blackwood for years. Why? How? And why had he never mentioned it to me? As the room grew quiet, memories from my past slowly began to surface. 25 years ago, Henry Blackwood was not rich. He was not powerful. He was a thin, angry young man with borrowed shoes and empty pockets. I met him at my warehouse. He came asking for work. I did not need anyone that day. Business was slow. Money was tight, but something about him felt familiar, desperate but proud. I gave him a chance. I paid him fairly. I taught him how to negotiate. I showed him how to read contracts. I warned him about bad partners. One night after a long day, he confessed something to me. He had been cheated by a man who promised to invest in his idea, then stole it. "I want revenge," Henry said back then, his fists shaking. "I want to destroy him." I put my hand on his shoulder and said words I believed deeply. "Revenge will eat you alive. Build something better instead." Henry listened. Or at least I thought he did. Weeks later he disappeared. No goodbye, no explanation. I never saw him again. Until now. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. A nurse entered. "Mr. Moore," she said kindly. "Mr. Blackwood is awake. He asked for you." My heart pounded as I followed her back into the room. Henry looked weaker than before. His eyes were tired but focused. "You remember me," he said softly. "Yes," I replied, "but I don't understand what you meant about betrayal." Henry swallowed slowly. "Daniel, I owe you my life, but I also hurt you, not directly, indirectly, through silence." I leaned closer. "Explain." He took a deep breath. "Years ago, when I became successful, people came to me. Many people, including your son." My head snapped up. "Eric." Henry nodded. "He introduced himself as your son. He said you were struggling. He said he wanted to help you." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. "Help me how?" Henry closed his eyes briefly. "By convincing me to stay away from you." The room felt like it was spinning. "Why?" I asked, my voice shaking. Henry's voice dropped. "He told me you were proud, that you hated charity, that seeing me would remind you of failure." Tears filled my eyes. "That's not true." "I know," Henry said. "I know now, but at the time I believed him." He coughed, struggling. The nurse moved closer, but Henry raised his hand to stop her. "Eric kept visiting," Henry continued. "He slowly became someone I trusted. He helped manage investments. He suggested legal structures. He positioned himself as a loyal advisor." My stomach turned. "He was using you," I said. "Yes," Henry replied, "and I let him." I clenched my fists. "What does this have to do with my business collapsing?" Henry's eyes filled with regret. "One of the companies that took your contracts, one of the banks that moved against you, I had influence there." My breath caught. "You caused it." "No," he said quickly, "but I could have stopped it, and I didn't, because Eric convinced me it was necessary. He said it would force you to accept help later on his terms." I felt sick. "All this time," I whispered, "my own son was shaping my fall." Henry nodded slowly. "I realized the truth too late. When I confronted him, he threatened to expose things from my past, dark things." "What things?" I asked. Henry looked away. "Things that would destroy my name." I stood up shaking. "So why call me now?" Henry looked back at me, his gaze steady. "Because I am dying," he said, "and because Eric thinks he is about to inherit everything." My heart slammed against my ribs. "You're saying my son expects your fortune?" I asked. "Yes," Henry replied. "He believes the will favors him." He reached for a folder beside the bed, with trembling fingers. "But it doesn't," he whispered. "Not anymore." The nurse stepped in. "Mr. Blackwood, you need to rest." Henry nodded, exhausted. As she adjusted the machines, he looked at me one last time. "Daniel," he said softly, "your son has been planning something, something final, and he believes you are no longer in the way." Fear crawled up my spine. "What is he planning?" I asked. Henry opened his mouth to answer. But before he could speak, the door burst open. And standing there was my son. Eric stood in the doorway like he owned the room. He was dressed well, calm, confident, not surprised to see me, not confused, just alert like a man who had walked into a place he already knew. For a moment, we stared at each other. Dad, he said finally, forcing a smile, I didn't expect to see you here. I said nothing. My chest felt tight. My mind raced with everything Henry had just told me. The nurse looked between us. Sir, only approved visitors are allowed in this room. Eric nodded politely. I am approved. Mr. Blackwood requested me earlier. Henry's eyes opened slowly. When he saw Eric, his face hardened in a way I had not seen before. You should not be here, Henry said weakly. Eric stepped inside anyway. I'm just checking on you, Henry, making sure everything is okay. His eyes flicked toward me, cold, sharp. Dad, you should go, Eric added. This is not the place for family drama. Family drama. The words burned. Henry struggled to sit up. No, he said, Daniel stays. Eric's smile disappeared. Henry, he said carefully, you're not thinking clearly. You're tired, you need rest. I am very clear, Henry replied. That is why you scare me now. The nurse shifted uncomfortably. James, the butler, appeared at the door. He had clearly sensed trouble. Mr. Blackwood, James said gently, would you like me to ask him to leave? Eric's jaw tightened. Ask who, me? Henry nodded slowly. Yes. For the first time I saw anger flash across my son's face. Real anger, uncontrolled. This is a mistake, Eric said. You're letting him confuse you. He is not the one who lied, Henry replied. Silence fell. Eric looked at me again, his eyes narrowed. What did he tell you? I took a deep breath. My voice came out calm, even though my heart was breaking. He told me everything. Eric laughed softly. Everything, you believe him. Dad, he's sick, he's confused. Henry slammed his hand weakly on the bed. Enough. Eric flinched. Leave, Henry said, now. Eric stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned to me. This isn't over, he said quietly. You don't understand what you're stepping into. He walked out without another word. The door closed behind him. My knees felt weak. I sat down heavily in the chair beside Henry's bed. You see, Henry whispered, that is not fear, that is calculation. James stood silently by the door. Henry closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. Daniel, you must listen carefully now. I do not have much time. I'm listening, I said. Your son came to me after your wife died, Henry continued. He said he wanted to protect you. He said you were proud and stubborn, that you would refuse help if it came directly. I swallowed hard. He suggested creating distance, Henry said. He said I should stay silent, that he would manage things, that he would take care of you. And instead, I said, he destroyed me. Henry nodded slowly. He believed that once you lost everything, you would depend on him completely, that you would obey. My hands clenched into fists. But something went wrong, Henry said. You did not beg, you did not crawl back, you remained silent. I thought of all the nights I slept on floors, all the calls I did not make, all the pride I swallowed alone. Henry coughed. That scared him. James stepped closer. Sir, please rest. Henry waved him off. Daniel, Henry said, Eric believes I am about to sign the final will tonight. My heart skipped. Tonight. Yes, Henry replied, and he believes his name is written all over it. I leaned forward, but you said it is. Henry reached under his pillow and pulled out a sealed envelope. This, he said, placing it in my hands, is the truth. I looked at it confused. What is this? My final instructions, Henry said, and proof of everything your son has done, transfers, emails, recordings. My breath caught. Why give this to me? Because, Henry said softly, if anything happens to me before the signing, this must still reach the right hands. A chill ran through me. You think something will happen? I asked. Henry looked toward the door Eric had walked through. I know it will. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The machines beside Henry beeped louder, then steadied. James rushed to the window. "Security," he muttered. "What's wrong?" I asked. James turned back, his face pale. "Mr. Moore, your son just ordered the security team to remove you from the premises." My heart slammed. "On what authority?" I asked. James hesitated. He said, "On Mr. Blackwood's behalf." Henry tried to sit up again. "He has no authority." But at that moment, heavy footsteps approached the room. 2 security guards appeared at the door. "Sir," one of them said to me, "you need to come with us." I looked at Henry. His eyes were wide with fear and urgency. "Do not let him take that envelope," Henry whispered. "Whatever happens, protect it." I clutched the envelope to my chest as the guards stepped forward. And just as one of them reached for my arm, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A message appeared on the screen. From Eric. "Leave now, Dad, or people you care about will suffer." The guards stood close to me, one on each side. I could feel their hands hovering near my arms, waiting for permission to force me out. My phone was still glowing in my hand, Eric's message burning into my eyes. "Leave now, Dad, or people you care about will suffer." For a moment, I could not breathe. People I care about. I had already lost my wife. I had lost my home. I had lost my dignity. Who was left? Then I thought of one name. Mary. My younger sister. She lived alone in a small town outside the city. Quiet, kind. She helped me after my business failed, even when she barely had enough herself, if Eric was threatening her. My hands began to shake. "Sir," one guard said firmly, "you need to come with us now." I looked at Henry. His face was pale, his eyes wide with worry. "Daniel," he whispered urgently, "do not trust him. He is trying to scare you." Henry was right, but fear is not logical. Fear goes straight to the heart. "I'll go," I said quietly. Henry grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "No," he said. "If you leave now, he wins." James stepped between us and the guards. "Mr. Blackwood has not authorized this removal," he said sharply. "You are acting on false orders." The guards hesitated. Just then Eric appeared again at the end of the hallway, calm, confident, smiling. "There seems to be confusion," he said smoothly. "I spoke with Henry earlier. He was tired, emotional. He agreed it would be best if my father rested elsewhere." "That is a lie," Henry shouted weakly from the bed. Eric walked closer, stopping just outside the room. "Henry, you need rest. You're imagining threats where there are none." I stepped forward. "Why are you doing this?" I asked him. "Why now?" Eric finally looked at me directly. His eyes were cold. "Because you refused to stay down," he said. "You were supposed to disappear quietly." The guards shifted uneasily. "Listen carefully," Eric continued, lowering his voice. "Henry is dying. By morning, none of this will matter. Do not make this harder than it needs to be." James turned to the guards. "You are dismissed now." They looked at Eric, then at Henry, then back at James. After a tense pause, they stepped back and left. Eric's jaw tightened. "This isn't over," he said. He turned and walked away again. The room fell silent, except for the soft beeping of the machines. Henry's breathing was shallow. He looked exhausted. "You see now," he said weakly. "He is not bluffing. He has already crossed lines." "What should I do?" I asked. Henry closed his eyes. "You must disappear for a short time. He believes you are weak and alone. Let him think that." James nodded. "We can arrange a safe place, quiet, secure." I hesitated. "And my sister?" James replied calmly. "I will send protection to her immediately." Relief washed over me, but fear still lingered. Henry reached for my hand again. "Daniel, there is something else you must know." I leaned closer. "Your son is not just after my money," Henry said slowly. "He is trying to erase evidence of crimes that connect both of us." My heart pounded. "What crimes?" Henry's eyes opened, filled with pain. Fraud, blackmail, manipulation of markets, things he convinced me were temporary, necessary. I pulled back, and the envelope contains proof, Henry replied. Enough to destroy him, enough to destroy me too. The weight of it settled heavily in my chest. You're asking me to carry this burden, I said. Henry nodded. Because you are the only one who will not use it for greed. I stood there, torn between fear and anger. That night James drove me to a small, hidden house on the edge of the city. No signs, no neighbors, just silence. As I sat alone in the dark, I replayed Eric's words in my mind. You were supposed to disappear quietly. I realized then that my son had not just betrayed me. He had planned my erasure. My phone vibrated again. Another message from Eric. This time it was shorter. You have 24 hours. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. 24 hours for what? And what would happen when time ran out? The house James brought me to was quiet in a way that made my thoughts louder. No traffic, no voices, just the hum of electricity and the sound of my own breathing. I sat on the edge of the bed, still holding the sealed envelope Henry had given me, like it might disappear if I let go. You have 24 hours. Eric's message echoed in my head again and again. 24 hours to do what? To give up the envelope, to leave the city, or to simply wait until he finished whatever he had already set in motion. I did not sleep that night. Every small sound made me sit up. Every shadow looked like a threat. I kept thinking of my sister, Mary, alone in her house. James had promised protection, but fear does not trust promises easily. Just before dawn, there was a knock on the door. My heart jumped. I grabbed the lamp, holding it like a weapon. Who is it? I called out. It's James, a calm voice answered. You're safe. I opened the door slowly. James stood there with two men in plain clothes. They looked alert, serious. They're part of my private security team, James said. Your sister is safe. She's under watch. Eric has not reached her. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Thank you, I said quietly. James stepped inside. We need to talk. We sat at the small table. James placed a folder beside the envelope. Last night, he said, Eric tried to access Mr. Blackwood's private vault. Financial records, legal files. He was denied. I frowned. How do you know? Because he used his old access codes, James replied. Codes that were removed weeks ago. Weeks ago. That meant Henry had started preparing for this long before he called me. What does Eric want most right now? I asked. James looked at me carefully. Control and silence. The words hit hard. He believes fear will make you give up the envelope, James continued. And he believes Henry will not survive long enough to stop him. As if on cue, James's phone rang. He answered quickly, listened, then closed his eyes. What is it? I asked. Mr. Blackwood's condition has worsened, he said. The doctors say he may not last the day. My chest tightened. If Henry dies before signing the will, I asked, what happens? James hesitated. Then Eric's version of events becomes much easier to sell. I stood up. Then we cannot wait. James nodded slowly. There is something Henry wanted you to see before today. He said only show it to you if Eric forced your hand. He opened the folder and slid a single document toward me. It was a copy of a legal trust. My name was written clearly on the first page. Daniel Moore. What is this? I asked, stunned. A trust Henry created 10 years ago, James said. He funded it quietly. He told no one, not even Eric. I shook my head. Why? James met my eyes. Because Henry never stopped feeling guilty. He believed your life fell apart because he stayed silent. My throat burned. The trust was meant to activate if certain conditions were met, James continued. One of them was proof of manipulation by Eric. I looked at the envelope in my hands. "So this," I said slowly, "is the key." "Yes," James replied, "but using it will start a war." I thought of my son, the boy I raised, the man who threatened his own father. "I didn't start this war," I said quietly, "but I won't run from it." My phone buzzed again. Another message from Eric. This time there was no threat, just confidence. "I know where you are." My blood ran cold. James looked at my face. What did he say? "He thinks he's already won," I replied. James stood up immediately. "We're moving now." We left the house within minutes. As we drove, James explained the plan. "Eric believes fear controls you," he said. "We are going to let him believe that a little longer." "By doing what?" I asked. "By giving him exactly what he thinks he wants," James replied. The car stopped near the hospital. "What?" I asked. "Why are we here?" James turned to me. "Because Eric is heading here too. He wants to make sure Henry never signs anything." My heart pounded. Inside the hospital, everything felt tense. Nurses moved quickly. Voices were low and urgent. Henry's room was guarded now. James spoke quietly to the staff, showing documents. We were allowed in. Henry lay still, barely conscious. His breathing was shallow. I stepped closer. "Henry," I whispered, "I'm here." His eyes fluttered open. He smiled weakly. "You came," he murmured. "Yes," I said, "and Eric is coming too." Henry's fingers twitched. "Good," he whispered. "Then he will hear the truth." James leaned in. "Sir, we are ready." Henry nodded faintly. "Bring him." Minutes later, Eric walked into the room. He froze when he saw me. "You're not supposed to be here," he said sharply. Henry found strength somewhere deep inside him. His voice was weak but clear. "No," Henry said, "you are." Eric laughed nervously. "Henry, you're not well. Let's not do this now." "It ends now," Henry replied. Eric turned to me, his eyes blazing. "Dad, stop this. You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said calmly, "for the first time in years." Henry nodded to James. James pressed a button on a small device. The room filled with sound. Eric's voice. Recordings of meetings, threats, instructions, manipulation. Eric stepped back pale. "Turn that off." "Everyone will hear this," Henry whispered. "Authorities, lawyers, boards." Eric's mask shattered. "You were supposed to stay quiet," he hissed at me. Henry looked at him with sadness. "I taught you nothing, did I?" Security entered the room. Eric turned to run, but it was too late. As they took him away, he looked back at me, fear finally replacing control. "This isn't over," he shouted. I met his gaze. "It is for me." Henry's breathing slowed. He looked at me one last time. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for everything." I squeezed his hand. "You gave me my voice back." Henry smiled. And then quietly he was gone. As machines fell silent around us, James placed the signed document in my hands. Outside the room, chaos began. Phones rang. Lawyers arrived. Sirens echoed in the distance. My life had changed forever. But as I stood there, holding proof, truth, and loss all at once, one question still burned in my mind. What would the world look like tomorrow, now that my own son's secrets were no longer buried? The hallway outside Henry's room filled with noise. Doctors spoke in low voices. Nurses moved fast. Lawyers whispered into phones. Security officers stood tall and serious. But inside my head, everything was quiet. Henry was gone. The man who had once been a poor worker in my warehouse. The man who became a billionaire. The man who stayed silent too long and then tried to fix his mistake at the very end, was gone. James placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "Sir, we need to move you now." "Move me where?" I asked softly. To safety, he replied. Eric may be in custody, but his reach does not end with him. That sentence made my stomach tighten. They led me through a private exit of the hospital. The air outside felt cold and sharp. Cameras flashed in the distance. I could already hear reporters shouting questions. Mr. Moore, did you inherit Henry Blackwood's fortune? Is it true there was betrayal inside the Blackwood estate? Sir, is your son involved? I did not answer. I got into the car and closed the door. As we drove away, James spoke calmly. Authorities are holding Eric for questioning, but he has lawyers, very good ones. I expected that, I said. James nodded. He will not stay silent, and he will not accept defeat easily. The car stopped at a different house this time, larger than the last one but still hidden. Inside, guards were already positioned. James handed me a phone. This line is secure. Only a few people can reach you. I looked at the phone like it was dangerous. That night, exhaustion finally caught up with me. I slept for a few hours, but my dreams were full of slammed doors, ringing phones, and my son's cold eyes. In the morning, James brought me breakfast and the news. Eric has been released on bail, he said. My heart skipped. Already? Yes, James replied. But charges are pending: fraud, blackmail, market manipulation. And the recordings, I asked. Filed with authorities, backed up in multiple locations. That gave me some comfort. But then James added, Eric is telling his own story now. What story? I asked. James hesitated. That you and Henry planned everything together, that you were the mastermind. I felt like I had been punched. He's blaming me? I asked. Yes, James said. He is saying you manipulated Henry out of revenge for being rejected. I stood up slowly. That's a lie. Of course it is, James said, but lies can still be dangerous. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. Dad, Eric's voice said calmly. My chest tightened. You shouldn't be calling me. They can't stop me, he replied. Not yet. You threatened your own family, I said. You destroyed my life. Eric laughed softly. You destroyed your own life by being weak. Those words hurt more than I expected. You think this is over, he continued. You think recordings end this. What do you want? I asked. I want you to give a statement, Eric said, publicly, saying Henry was confused, saying you acted alone. No, I replied without hesitation. There was a pause. Then Eric's voice changed, lower, sharper. Then I will make sure everyone believes you are the villain, he said, including the people you're trying to protect. My heart dropped. Who? Eric smiled through the phone. I could hear it. Mary, he said, and anyone else you still care about. The line went dead. I stood there shaking. James looked at my face and knew immediately. He called you. Yes, I said, and he's not done. James took a deep breath. Then it's time you stop hiding. What do you mean? I asked. You cannot fight someone like Eric from the shadows, James said. You must step into the light. I looked out the window. Reporters were already gathered at the gate. My whole life, I said quietly, I avoided attention. James nodded. And your son used that against you. I turned back to him. What do we do? James's eyes were steady. We tell the truth, all of it, on record. My heart pounded. You mean a public hearing? I asked. Yes, he replied, with evidence, witnesses, and your voice. I thought of Henry's last smile, of the envelope, of the trust with my name on it. I'm ready, I said. James nodded. Then prepare yourself, because once this begins, Eric will strike back harder than ever. As if to prove his point, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message alert. News headline: Billionaire's death sparks scandal. Son-in-law accuses his own father of mastermind betrayal. My name was everywhere, and I knew then that the real battle was only just beginning. By the next morning, my face was everywhere. On television screens, on phones, on newspaper websites. Some headlines called me a victim, others called me a liar, a few even called me a monster. I watched silently as one reporter said, "Sources close to Eric Moore claim his father manipulated the late billionaire Henry Blackwood out of revenge after being rejected by his own family." Rejected by my own family. The words felt like salt in an open wound. James switched off the television. "You don't need to see that." "I do," I said quietly. "If I don't face it, it will swallow me." James nodded. "The public hearing has been scheduled 3 days from now." My stomach tightened. "That soon?" "Yes," he replied. "Eric pushed for it. He wants speed, confusion, emotion." "He thinks I'll crack," I said. "He thinks you'll stay silent," James corrected. "He doesn't know you anymore." That day lawyers came, accountants, investigators. They sat across from me for hours asking questions, showing documents, replaying recordings. Each piece made one thing clearer. Eric had been busy for years. He had used my name to open doors. He had spoken on my behalf without my knowledge. He had positioned himself as my protector while quietly cutting me off from help. And worst of all, he had convinced himself he was right. "He believes he saved you from yourself," one lawyer said. "In his mind, everything he did was justified." That night I could not sleep. I kept seeing Eric as a child, the boy who used to wait for me by the door, the boy who cried when I worked late. Where did I lose him? The next day, James brought difficult news. "Eric has filed a restraining order," he said. "Against me?" I asked. "Yes," James replied. "He claims you are unstable and dangerous." I let out a bitter laugh. "So now I'm a threat." "It's a strategy," James said, "to make your testimony seem unreliable." My phone rang again. This time it was Mary. Her voice was shaky. "Daniel, men came by the house this morning, asking questions, taking pictures." My heart raced. "Are you safe?" "Yes," she said, "but I'm scared." I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this." "You didn't," Mary replied firmly. "Your son did." Those words gave me strength. "Mary," I said, "if things get worse, I may need you to speak publicly." There was a pause, then she said, "I will." 2 days before the hearing, something unexpected happened. James came to me holding a tablet. "Someone else wants to testify," he said. "Who?" I asked. James turned the screen toward me. "It was Laura, my daughter-in-law. She contacted us this morning," James said. "She wants immunity." My heart pounded. "Why?" James's voice was serious. "Because she says Eric hid money under her name, and because she's afraid he'll blame her next." I leaned back stunned. "The woman who pushed me out of my son's house," I whispered. "Yes," James said, "and she's ready to talk." That night I sat alone, thinking about everything. If Laura spoke, it would destroy Eric's story. But it would also destroy what little family remained. I slept badly, torn between justice and grief. On the morning of the hearing, as I put on my jacket, James looked at me carefully. "Once you walk into that room," he said, "there is no turning back." I nodded. "I already lost everything once. I won't lose the truth." We arrived at the courthouse to flashing cameras and shouting voices. Inside, the room was packed. Eric sat at one table with his lawyers, calm, confident, smiling at the crowd. When he saw me, his smile faded. The judge entered. "Proceed," the judge said. The prosecutor stood. "Mr. Daniel Moore," he said, "please take the stand." As I walked forward, my legs felt heavy, but my mind was clear. I sat down, I raised my hand, I swore to tell the truth. Eric leaned back in his chair, watching me closely. I looked straight at him, and before I could speak, his lawyer stood up suddenly. "Your Honor," he said, "we have a new motion. A crucial witness has disappeared." The room exploded into whispers. My heart dropped. "Who?" the judge asked. Eric's lawyer turned slowly toward me. "Mary Moore," he said. "My sister. Gone." The courtroom went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face as the words settled in. "Mary Moore," Eric's lawyer repeated calmly, "cannot be located." I stood up without thinking. "That's a lie," I said, my voice shaking. "I spoke to her yesterday." The judge raised a hand. "Mr. Moore, sit down." My legs felt weak as I lowered myself back into the chair. James leaned toward me, his face tight. "We'll find her," he whispered. "Stay calm." But fear does not listen to reason. Eric did not look surprised. He did not look worried. He sat there with his hands folded, his face calm, almost bored. That was when I knew. This was not a coincidence. The prosecutor cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we request a brief recess. This information is new." The judge nodded. 15 minutes. As soon as we stepped out of the courtroom, I turned to James. "Where is my sister?" James was already on the phone, speaking fast, his voice low. He ended the call and looked at me. "Her house is empty," he said. "No signs of struggle. Her phone is off." My chest tightened painfully. "Eric took her." James shook his head slowly. "We don't know that yet." "Yes, we do," I said. "This is how he works, fear, control." Before James could reply, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. My hands trembled as I answered. "Dad," Eric's voice said smoothly. "Court not going as planned." My vision blurred with rage. "Where is my sister?" Eric laughed softly. "Always so direct, you taught me that." "You touch her and—" my voice broke. "And what?" Eric interrupted. "You'll tell the truth harder." I closed my eyes. "What do you want?" Eric's tone changed, becoming cold and serious. "When you return to the stand, you will say Henry manipulated you. You will say the recordings were taken out of context." "No," I said, "I won't lie." There was a pause. Then Eric spoke again, slower this time. "Then you will never see Mary again." The call ended. I stood there shaking, my fists clenched so tight they hurt. James grabbed my shoulders. "Daniel, look at me." "They have her," I whispered. James nodded grimly. "Then we adjust." "How?" I asked desperately. "We use what Eric doesn't know we have," James replied. He pulled out a tablet and opened a file. "Henry prepared for this," he said. "He suspected Eric would cross this line." On the screen were security logs, bank transfers, and something that made my breath catch. A live feed. Mary was sitting in a small room, unharmed but clearly frightened. Two men stood near the door. "Where is she?" I asked. "A private property Eric controls," James said. "But now we know." Tears filled my eyes. "Can we get her out?" James nodded. "Yes, but it will take time, and Eric will not wait." A court officer appeared. "Recess is over, Mr. Moore, you're needed inside." My heart pounded. "If I tell the truth," I said, "he hurts her." James looked at me steadily. "And if you lie, he will never stop." I swallowed hard. We walked back into the courtroom. The judge looked at me. "Mr. Moore, are you ready to continue your testimony?" I looked across the room. Eric met my eyes and smiled slightly. This was the moment. Truth or silence? Justice or fear? I opened my mouth to speak. And just as I did, James's phone vibrated in his hand. He looked down. His face went pale. "They're moving her," he whispered. The judge spoke again. "Mr. Moore." I took a deep breath, my heart tearing in two. What I said next would decide everything. My mouth was dry. My heart felt like it was being crushed from both sides. The judge was watching me. The lawyers were watching me. The room was quiet, waiting for my words. But all I could see was Mary's face on that screen in James's hand, afraid, trapped, paying the price for my courage. "Mr. Moore," the judge said gently, "you may continue." I swallowed hard. I knew Henry Blackwood many years ago, I began slowly. Eric leaned back in his chair, relaxed, confident. "He came to my warehouse as a young man looking for work," I continued. "I gave him a chance when others didn't. So far, nothing dangerous, just truth." James stood behind me, silent, his phone hidden at his side. I could feel the tension coming off him like heat. "I did not know he would become a billionaire," I said. "And I did not know my son would one day build a relationship with him behind my back." Eric's smile twitched. That got his attention. "Objection," Eric's lawyer said quickly. "Speculation." The judge raised a hand. "Overruled, continue." Eric's eyes locked onto mine, sharp warning. I took a breath and kept going. "For years," I said, "I struggled alone. I did not know help had been offered. I did not know conversations were happening in my name." Eric sat up straighter now. "And when my business failed," I said, my voice trembling but clear, "I believed it was my fault. I believed I had simply failed as a man." A murmur moved through the courtroom. "But that belief," I said, "was carefully built." Eric's lawyer stood again. "Your Honor." "Sit down," the judge said firmly. The room went silent again. I turned slightly and looked directly at Eric. "It was built by someone I trusted," I said. "Someone who decided that controlling my fall was better than letting me stand." Eric's face hardened. That was when James stepped forward. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "with permission, we have real-time evidence that directly supports Mr. Moore's testimony." Eric jumped to his feet. "No." The judge frowned. "What kind of evidence?" James raised the tablet. "Proof of coercion," he said, "and proof that a key witness was taken against her will." The room erupted. Eric shouted, "That's fake, he's lying." The judge banged the gavel. "Order." James turned the screen toward the court monitors. The video feed appeared. Mary, alive, sitting in the same room. The courtroom gasped. Mary looked up at the camera, startled. Then her eyes widened. "Daniel," she whispered. Tears streamed down my face. "She is alive," James said firmly, "and she is being held on property owned by Eric Moore under a shell company." Eric backed away slowly, shaking his head. "This is insane." The judge stood. "Court is adjourned immediately. Bailiff, detain Mr. Eric Moore." Chaos exploded. Eric tried to run. Security grabbed him. "Dad," he screamed as they pulled him back. "You think this ends me. You don't know who I worked with." That sentence hit me like ice. "You don't know who I worked with." The judge turned sharply. "What does he mean by that?" Eric laughed wildly now, panic breaking through his control. "You think I did all this alone?" he shouted. "There are people who will not let this story die." James leaned close to me, his voice low and urgent. "He's right," he said. "Eric was a middleman." My heart sank. As Eric was dragged out of the courtroom, he twisted his head toward me one last time. "You just started something you can't finish," he said, "and they won't forgive you." The doors slammed behind him. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. I sank back into my chair, shaking. Mary was alive. But something far bigger than my son had just been revealed. And I realized with terrifying clarity that Eric's arrest was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of something much darker. The days after the courtroom felt unreal. Everything moved fast, yet my heart felt slow and heavy, like it was still catching up. Eric was taken into custody that same day. not just for what he did to me, but for many crimes that finally came into the light. Mary was rescued that evening. When I saw her again, she was tired, shaken, but alive. She hugged me tightly and cried into my shoulder. "I was so scared," she said, "but I kept telling myself you wouldn't stop fighting." Her words broke something inside me, and for the first time in a long while I cried openly, not from fear or shame, but from relief. The truth came out fully after that. Eric had not worked alone, but he was not protected either. The people he claimed to work with were powerful, but they cared only about protecting themselves. Once the evidence became public, they cut ties with him quickly. Deals were denied. Calls went unanswered. Doors closed. Just like they once closed on me. The investigation revealed everything clearly. Eric had slowly positioned himself as Henry Blackwood's trusted advisor. He used charm, intelligence, and lies. He redirected contracts, influenced banks, and blocked financial help meant for me. He believed controlling my failure would make him stronger. Laura, my daughter-in-law, testified as well. Her voice shook, but she told the truth. She admitted she allowed Eric to hide money in accounts under her name. She said she pushed me out of the house because Eric told her I was dangerous, unstable, and likely to ruin their image. "I was afraid," she said, "but I was also wrong." Her testimony sealed Eric's fate. The recordings, documents, and financial trails were undeniable. Eric was charged with fraud, coercion, kidnapping, blackmail, and obstruction of justice. He did not look at me during sentencing. When the judge spoke, his voice was firm and clear. "You abused trust," the judge said. "You harmed family for control, and you used fear as a weapon." Eric was sentenced to many years in prison. Not because I wanted revenge, but because truth demanded accountability. After everything settled, the trust Henry created was activated legally. I did not become a billionaire overnight. Much of the money was set aside for restitution, charities, and legal settlements. But enough remained. Enough to give me stability. Enough to give me dignity. I chose not to rebuild my old business. Instead, I opened a small foundation. Quiet, honest. It helped people who had lost everything through betrayal, debt, or manipulation. People who felt invisible. I visited Henry's grave one early morning. I stood there alone and spoke softly. "You fixed it in the end," I said. "Thank you." I never heard from Eric again. Not a letter, not a message, nothing. And I did not seek him out. Because some betrayals do not need forgiveness to heal. They need distance and truth. Mary moved closer to me. We shared meals, we talked, we laughed again. Slowly, life became simple and peaceful. I learned something important through all of this. Silence can protect others for a while, but it destroys you in the end. Speaking the truth is frightening, but it frees you in ways silence never can. I lost my home. I lost my business. I lost my son. But I did not lose myself. And in the end, that was the one thing no one could ever take from me.